Today we are sharing 6 tips on how to grieve in a world where grief isn't always welcome.
Hello, we're Jeff and
Tony Brabeck.
of Our Little Sparrows, Pregnancy and Infant Loss Support. If you'd like to find out more about us and our organization, you can click on the link below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so that you get alerts when we release new episodes every week. Stick around, we're going to get started right now. So in the last episode, we specifically talked about how our society has these unwritten rules on grief, which can obviously make it really difficult and lonely for those experiencing all kinds of losses. And we also shared with you the 6 myths of grief from the Grief Recovery Handbook. And you can access this episode by clicking on the cards above. We'll make that available for you. Today, we're specifically going to now talk about 6 tips that will help enable you to grieve your losses in a healthy way. So, tip number 1, grief is healthy. I know that doesn't sound accurate, but it is. It's a healthy thing. Mm-hmm. We need to recognize that feelings of grief are healthy and necessary. Mm-hmm. So whether it's finding out during a routine ultrasound that your baby's heartbeat has stopped, or month after month, another negative pregnancy test, there is grief in both of those instances. Love, hope, and grief are intertwined with each other. To grieve means that you loved. And we have a quote that we found that we thought was really applicable to this, and we'll read it to you right now. Mm-hmm. Grief is really just love. It's all the love you want to give but cannot. All of the unspent love gathers in your eyes, lumps in your throat, and in the hollow part of your chest. Grief is just love with nowhere to go. Mm-hmm. And the author is unknown on that quote.
Tip number 2. Embrace your grief. Give yourself permission and space to explore your feelings of grief. It's okay to feel sad sometimes. When you feel an emotion and your tendency is to push that feeling away or replace it with something else, maybe this time, embrace it. Allow yourself a moment and acknowledge it. Replacing the loss isn't always what you need. As mentioned in our last episode, people intend to offer you comfort by saying things like, don't feel bad, you can have another baby, or at least you have a living child. Statements like these can make a person feel brushed off and dismissed, like their experience is insignificant. Before you try to have another baby or replace the void with something else, ask yourself first if you are trying to hide or ignore the pain of your loss by replacing it. If the answer is yes, then perhaps there is something you need to pay attention to first.
So specifically, with our experience after losing Olivia, we weren't thinking in the realms of like replacing the loss. That's such a technical, it's not, but it's not like you sit down and say, okay, so we got to make sure we're not replacing the loss. We didn't even know what that meant. Mm-hmm. We didn't even know that term existed or that, that definition, I guess, or phrase. Mm-hmm. So for us, I think it was like, I remember approaching you, and that's just, our communication kind of runs that way. She tends to be the quieter one, and I'm the one that more or less prompts conversation because I have questions, and I don't like waiting. So anyhow, I do remember asking you, do you want to try and have another baby? Period. Like that was a very broad question, because I didn't know, and so I asked.
Yes, I remember him asking that, and I wanted to try to have another baby. It was just a matter of when,
being ready. Yeah.
I remember wanting to just take some time. I didn't want to rush into things, and I think I don't even remember, but it was almost a year afterwards.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't want to rush it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure I asked more than once.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure I said, I'm not ready yet.
Yeah. Still not ready.
But, I don't know that I ever really felt ready 100%. I think that's just something that you yourself will know, you and your spouse or your partner will know when that time is right. And
I think for me, without knowing about these replacement thoughts and grieving and what grieving is and the process of grieving and what the journey looks like, I think for me, it was a lesson in learning that, I mean, like I knew, like it's her body, it's her choice, right? But it was a lesson for me in waiting and being patient and waiting for when she, when she's ready, when she feels like herself, her personhood, you know, her heart and her mind and her body are ready, to say I'm at peace with. I mean, how could you be totally at peace? But to say I'm at peace with what happened with Olivia, and I'm now open to the idea of looking to another child, knowing that Olivia is our child, our firstborn. Olivia was born. We were with her, even though she couldn't stay with us. And I had to learn that process from watching her, as well as the conversations that we had about whether or not we're going to try and have another child.
Yes, and I think too, I wanted to be careful because this is why I want to share this example in this segment here, because we're talking about replacing the loss, is that I didn't want to rush into things and make it feel like just having another baby is going to make everything okay. It's going to make all of that sadness and the anguish that we experience just kind of disappear. And I wanted to be, I don't know if realistic is the word, but I wanted to
honest, maybe
honest, and just
yeah.
I didn't want another baby to diminish our experience. Like, it wouldn't. I mean, I just didn't want it to take away from our grief process. And I wanted to, I just wanted to make sure that we were taking the time to kind of make sure we were okay. That was a
That's interesting, because I never knew
significant loss.
I never knew you felt that way, that you thought of it in the way that you thought of it in the context of our grief and grieving.
I didn't in the moment then, but I feel like I didn't really have the words for it then. But I wanted to take time. I wanted to make sure that we weren't just going to rush into having another baby and think that our baby is just going to, erase or take away all of the pain and suffering that we had with Olivia. And we had that experience, and I wanted to feel like that experience, we went through that pain for something.
So tip number 3, it's important to find a community. I know we've talked about this a few times now, but the community is really something that can surround you with the support and the understanding that you need. So you reach out to your church. There's grief share groups are very common and popular in different parts of the country. You can share with trusted family or friends what support you're looking for. And you may be surprised. There might be a relative that experienced a miscarriage or a stillbirth, but was never talked about. So they themselves can be a resource and support, but you won't know unless you're willing to take that step of vulnerability and to reach out and say something. Even though everyone knows that you're grieving, you must be grieving the loss, they don't know what that looks like unless you tell them what's happening with you. So they could definitely be that resource for you that you thought may never have imagined that it was there. So looking for more than one source of support, I think, is also something that is important, and we recommend that. And what we mean by that is looking for something that's healthy to try and have a network. The network itself can help you in different things, different aspects of your grief process that you may not even be aware of. So obviously a direct support group is important, pregnancy and infant loss for our community. For us, we found Sharing Parents, but we also found support within our own family and friends and just talking to them. Yes. So there's local resources, there's online resources, and we'll put a link in the cards to our previous episode. We actually, 2 episodes ago, we listed, when we were defining grief, we listed support groups for online in various support. So we'll put a link to that in the cards above. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to add that I myself was part of an online support group on Facebook. It was a private group for mothers who were given a fatal diagnosis of their baby, and they continued to carry to term. And so that was another source of support for me, on top of our family, as well as finding Sharing Parents at Sacramento. So there's a variety of support sources and community that we got to be a part of. And, it was really nice to have that variety, because not one source will be like the support, all the support that you need. It was good to
Right.
have like that variety, because, they meet different needs. And so that was a healthy experience for us,
Yeah.
I think.
But you definitely want to find a support group for specifically what you're going through.
Yeah, if you can.
And then the friend and family member, because they know you so well, they have that extra layer of support that they can give you on a personal, level, because they've known you. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Tip number 4. Take action, not time. So, time alone does not heal all wounds. Over time, there are different intensities of grief. And initially, it can be strong, it can be raw, and overwhelming. Months or so later, the intensity can be less raw, and you will see how grief ebbs and flows throughout your life. But time, in and of itself, doesn't necessarily bring you healing. Many suffer broken hearts for years, but it's taking action with proper tools that can truly help you heal your heart and move forward. An example for us was that maybe 3 months after Olivia passed, or maybe it
3 to
was
4.
4
Yeah.
months, we decided to go to a Sharing Parents support meeting. And
As a local
it was
pregnancy and infant loss support
local, yes, local support group. Thankfully, it wasn't too far away from us. But we just decided that we needed to go and just, try it out, do
Right.
one meeting and just see what happens. And so we went, and we have been a part of Sharing Parents ever since. And they've been an essential part of our healing journey, just being a part of that really special community of other parents who've experienced pregnancy loss as well. And being able to connect with them has been such been a gift, and like I said, just a essential part of our healing.
Right.
And it took us saying to each other, yes, let's go, let's try it out at least one time and just see what happens. And so that was our action. Our action was to take that initiative
Right.
and step out of our comfort zone, because we didn't know anybody in this
No.
group, and didn't know what it was going to be like or what it would involve. And so we just decided, you know what, we need to step out and ask for help. And by doing that, we took the action to go
Right.
and try it out.
Yeah.
And that was one that, we just stayed with it. And now we're volunteers. So
Yeah, exactly. I think it was very interesting to find out how common certain losses are in the community, and to see that pattern over time. We've been a part of the group for well over 4 years now.
as volunteers, yeah.
As volunteers, and then we've been with them for close to 6.5 years, because Olivia's 7th birthday will be this October. So I believe February was our 6th
first.
year with Sharing Parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was really good. It was basically just sitting around in a circle of other parents, and we shared our story, and that's all the monthly grief support really is sharing your story, why you're there, and then whatever questions you have with each other. It was very eye-opening just to know that you're not alone. It was very anti-isolating. It took that feeling of isolation, because no one else in our family had ever experienced anything. So there really wasn't that level of support provided from our immediate family because of that. No foul, no harm to that, no fault of their own.
Right.
So it was just to be around other family members, I think, at its bare minimum, was very beneficial. Yeah.
Yes.
and it forces you to be vulnerable and talk about your loss. I mean, you can opt out from not talking, but I mean, if you're there to see a process through, you're encouraged, to talk. Tip number 5: to be intentional with your grief. So what do we mean by this? We mean keeping busy doesn't always make you feel better or make grief go away. So yes, keeping up with daily routines and responsibilities can help refocus and put attention elsewhere for a bit, and that is okay. However, if you're investing so much time in work or activities that you are secretly hoping the grief and pain will go away on its own, sooner or later, your grief will manifest itself in your life on its own, and that will not come out well. It never does. And it'll come out when you least expect it, too.
Yeah. Tip number 6: determine where your strength is coming from. Sometimes our efforts to be strong for others results in us becoming more focused on their healing while ignoring our own brokenness. Sometimes being strong for others means you need to take steps to be strong for yourself first. It's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to receive help. I think for us, I know that taking time to see a counselor was something that I needed, and Jeff, you have even done so yourself. We saw separate counselors, and I think that's something that that was both beneficial to us and that we needed to do in order to just have that outlet to a third-party person that didn't know us, that was not from our own circle of family or friends and so forth. And just to be able to take that time and process with someone that had a different lens or a different set of eyes that could see things from more of an objective perspective was really helpful. And I think sometimes when we're able to do that and take time to kind of give ourselves that time to process, then we are able to be, we can focus on other things. We can help people in their difficult times. I feel personally a little bit more equipped to walk with others. It's not necessarily necessary to have that, but I thought that it was really helpful for me.
I mean, personally, myself, I always, from day one that we started this process to where Olivia was born and gone after that, I always had the mindset that I can't find my strength in another person, nor can I find my strength in getting through or over this grief through throwing myself into my work or anything like that. I knew it was going to take time. I knew that things will reveal themselves as time went by. I knew that if we continued talking together, if we continued telling each other what we were thinking and what we're feeling, that process, that just doing that in itself is very healing. Just knowing that your partner understands, or at least is listening and hears you, is huge. And if you don't have a partner, it's another person. It's a confidant. It's someone who either knows you or doesn't know you. It can come from a myriad of different places. But if you're in a committed relationship, ideally it should be with your partner. I think that's kind of a must. And so I just knew the basics. I didn't necessarily know all this detail but I knew from the way I was raised and grew up that you need to process and internalize for yourself, what is happening in your situation and what you're going to do about it. And that, looking for answers in other people is not healthy, right? But discovering the answers for yourself is healthy. So, we knew the basics. I would say we had a head start in certain ways, just the way we were raised. So I came at it from that point, that if we just kept talking and we gave it time, that we would figure out our new journey, our new path as a married couple. And we would take it and do with it as we decided for ourselves individually and ourselves as a couple.
As we said in our last episode, To recover from grief requires us to become vulnerable. Our ability to be vulnerable can potentially result in one of two things. 1, it invites others to be vulnerable also. 2, it can scare others as they fear it requires their vulnerability as well. Depending on how you look at it, vulnerability is a sign of strength or weakness. We believe it is a sign of strength. We hope you found this episode helpful. We want you to know you are not alone. You are loved. Your baby will always be cherished. We want to support you in any way we can.
If you got value out of this episode, please give us a thumbs up so others can find our channel. Don't forget to also subscribe and ring that bell so you get alerts when we release new content every Sunday. If you like this episode and want to see another video podcast, you can click or tap on the episode above. If you want to go more in depth, we do have a grief series called The Pregnancy Journey, grieving from diagnosis to the loss of your baby and beyond. You can click or tap down below.